on it. So I've got like a list I posted in Slack, and I'll just read it, and happy to dive into each piece that we want to discuss. The first one is the Q port. So the Q port is working, and I did two implementations. One kind of using Redis with a node library on top called BQ, which is just a wrapper around the Redis kind of pub/sub stuff, and makes it a push-pull kind of queue. But the one that I was really excited about was ZeroMQ. So I don't know if you guys remember ZeroMQ. It came out a while ago from the inventor of RabbitMQ or whatever, and it's like it's just super nice because it's all TCP ports, and you just send it to a port, and it takes care of the batching and queuing for you, and then it just emits to any workers, and it's just a really nice pattern. And I hammered it when I was working on the implementation. And what's nice about it is there's no there's no single point of failure, right? So if I run 10 instances of Hyper, that's 10 producers and 10 consumers, right? They're all scaling at that level. So that's kind of cool. That was exciting. And then rebranding news. So we have acquired hyper.io, and we'll be changing the name to Hyper instead of Hyper 63. Actually got a new site design. I can show you guys if you want to take a look at it. Got to implement it, but it is actually final. The design folks finalized it today, which is pretty cool.
Welcome to Nginx.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's see. Okay, here we go. So let's see here. Screen.
Ooh, pretty.
Okay, let's see if I can get it. Yep. So this is the design. They built these graphics, and then kind of created this kind of flow, which is really cool, where you got all of these challenges flow into Hyper, and it flows down to all of the ports, and then you click on each port and you can kind of see what each port's all about. So I thought that was pretty cool. And then they've got this, and then the FAQ. And one of the cool things was like, wanted it to be simple, pragmatic, and clean. So they really focused on trying to use graphics to draw that. So there's not a lot of photos. It's just a lot of neat little graphics. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, that looks great, and love it.
There's the mobile. Oops. Let's see. And then the rest is just kind of other pages. That's the pricing page. And this is kind of the products page. The about page. But lots of cool little graphics.
Is there any stuff about this? Is there any stuff in there and I don't know if you want this or not, about the open source nature of things?
There is, and we'll work on the copy, but I basically gave him the copy of the current site, and we'll work on improving the copy to get that in. One of the things they did is they did like a graphic of all the kind of the benefits, but it just kind of looked really busy, right? It's like all the illities, right? And it's like, well, I think I can get that into writing. But I think we can reword some of these things and put open source in there. But they're not copy people. They were pretty much all design, focused on graphic design. So, but yeah, and I'm looking forward. We'll have these graphics that we can repurpose on other pieces too. So that's cool to have these custom graphics all there.
Yeah, and you can make that real fancy with SVG, and you can get as crazy with it as you want to.
Yeah, I think that will be kind of fun, because with Figma you can just select an image, and then like the logo here, I was doing this, you can just copy it as SVG and then you can go to town, which is pretty cool. So all these images you just immediately turn into SVG.
That's too cool.
Yeah. And the other, you guys probably have used Figma more than I have, but it gives you all the CSS too, if you need it.
I do appreciate that.
Me too. It just needs to convert it to Tailwind. So then I'd be happy. But so that's the new site, which is really cool. And then let's see. One of the things, and it won't go into, but and I talked with Tripp and Tyler about this, but I've been fighting like JS and TS, and I think we're leaning to just stay the course with JS and use JS docs where it makes sense to export types. The TS is wonderful if every single library you're going to ever use is TS, right? But then there's some things that like the currying is, you just feel like you're writing so much more code than you have to. But anyway, I'm sure we'll continually to revisit that. But a lot of people have found that they don't run the checker as much as they just run ES build. And maybe they have it in their CI to run the checks. But if, and I know that Visual Studio runs the checks, but still it would be kind of easy to kind of not hit a check. So anyway, that was that. And what I'm working on now is kind of a roadmap to try to get to V1. And this Q thing kind of came up, which was good. It was requested by a customer, but both customers are signed on for a year, which is great. And both of them will be in production by the end of this month, which is really good. And I feel like the REST API is kind of stabilizing. There's a couple of tweaks that I would like to make, but I think overall it seems to be pretty stable. And I think the data search and cache and storage and queues are all doing well. Again, storage is one that's just haven't really tested a lot because I haven't had a lot of use cases for it yet, but that's one that's kind of, you know, needs some testing, but data is working great, search, cache. And then I added service monitoring, and I'm using Elastic APM. But the way that I added it is because Hyper is modular, it can be added as part of the service implementation and not attached to core. So you could use Elastic or Sentry or whatever monitoring solution you want. And I just picked Elastic mainly because I've had some experience with it before. And I also want to work on, so it's using the APM side of Elastic, but I also want to work on sending the logs into Elastic and use the Elk stack for that. But if you guys have other monitoring tools that you'd like me to try out, I did look at Prometheus and Grafana, and that looks really cool, but it's like the time sucked to put that together versus just putting something on there was the kind of the trade-off. So that's kind of the current status. And then in April, really want to work on a stable Node.js client. And the earlier was kind of debating whether we should just go all REST and say, you know, build your own client. But the more that I thought about it, the more I did research, having a really nice DSL for your client, I think will really make that onboarding experience so much easier for developers. So kind of played around with kind of these types of things where it really kind of narrows Hyper to a smaller use case, if you will. So like most of the time, you're going to have one database with one cache, with one search, with one queue, right? So what the HyperClient kind of does is allows you to have a config, and then you can specify your models in that config if you wanted to. And then you can just kind of call your models by saying, you know, h.cache movie, and then set, and it'll kind of know that it's a movie model or a review or a comment. So it the goal is to kind of, you know, if you think of Mongoose, kind of have like a Mongoose like client where, but you have data, cache, queue, etc. And certainly you can break out and do more things, but this is just kind of like the less decisions you have to get started, the better type of thing. Does that make sense?
Frictionless.
Yeah. And it's kind of funny. It's, you know, you kind of build out this generic thing, and then as you get ready to launch it, you narrow it down to become more, you know, kind of opinionated. But the cool thing is putting the opinions in the client and not in the service. That way it can kind of serve many opinions if those use cases come up. At least that's the goal.
That's an interesting way to put it. Yeah. But
Since frameworks are just opinions that you should follow along with, then that leaves the door open for multiple frameworks on top of the core.
Right. And there's really this, you know, and there's more battles going on, but the main battles are, you know, the SPA versus SSR versus serverless, right? Those are like the main battles. And then there's, you know, maybe NoSQL and Postgres. but I think, you know, that's kind of, you know, if you choose Postgres, you're choosing Postgres, and you're choosing an ORM, you're choosing, you know, all of these tools to manage that Postgres. Whereas you got a SPA where you're, you know, building out an API and separating your presentation from that API pretty clearly. Then you have SSR, and with server-side rendering, you can do the same thing. And I think actually that's the best kind of workflow is to build the SSR just like you would build a SPA or Jamstack app and have your API separate. But I know that people aren't doing that. They're kind of mixing their business rules in that SSR with the next or a SvelteKit. And then the other one is serverless, where, you know, each endpoint is essentially a function. And, you know, there's so many ways to tackle that. I think Hyper will, I think Hyper will probably not be a good client on serverless, but I think it can be a good server for serverless, right? It can provide a good set of serverless features for your serverless app, if that makes sense. Especially with edge computing. I think that's something interesting. But anyway, those are all the kinds of things that I'm thinking through on this. And I think being able to build examples using Node, examples using Vercel, examples using render or begin, etc., showing like you can use the same client with the Hyper service, and you can use it for all three of those kind of target areas. I think that will be kind of cool. So what I've been working on really this month is trying to take this client and put together something, and I put some screenshots in the Slack, but it's kind of funny. It's like the client is driving this free dev service. So I'm working on putting together a Hyper free development service where you can essentially sign up with GitHub, and it will generate an app that will give you a key, secret, and app credentials as one configuration, and that will spin up a Hyper instance for you, which is kind of cool. And that kind of works into this multi-tenant kind of piece that I've been working on today, and it's really just a proof of concept, and it's kind of a very minimal implementation of kind of what our SaaS could be in the future. But basically it's going to help me essentially build guides and workshops. And as they work through the guides and workshops, the first requirement is get you a free Hyper service running, right? So here's what I've got so far. not a lot of design, but basically you click and connect with GitHub. And if you're connected with GitHub, you basically get this dashboard and you get one app. And that one app here is, for me, T Wilson 63. So whatever your GitHub account is, that's the name of your app. And then this connection string is everything you need to connect to your Hyper instance, right? So you copy that, and then you come to your client and you use an environment variable to paste that string in. And then the HyperClient actually reads that string and parses it using the node URL parser, and then will generate a token for you when you make requests. So all you have to do is, and I'll actually make this hyper : probably, so it doesn't look like an actual URL, because this is not an actual URL. It's more of just a one-line config. So you don't have to have 5 environment variables. And then with that connection string, you can come in and you can choose to define models. Or if you don't want to define models, you don't have to. You can choose to add validation, which you should, but you don't have to. And then when you start to use Hyper, you get this nice kind of DSL that will be autocomplete friendly, right? So .data, and then enter your model, .list, and then enter, your filtering attributes, or .create or .post or whatever. So that's kind of where I'm at. Is there any questions about that direction, or any observations or comments?
Yeah, this is great. And I don't know if this is a good idea, but it just hit me about so on GitHub you can make you can mark a repository as being a template. And so it's like intended to be a template and intended to be forked. And I wonder if there's like a couple of basic, for the different, I'm not sure if you've already done this, but for the Next.js is for the insert framework here, like here's a starter template to, to basically clone or fork and clone. And all you got to do is change this, one line and maybe add a model, unless there's like an easily removable default one where it's like you're already set up and ready to go. You don't have to do anything else. But also having something like this where they've already got a project. Here you go.
Yep.
I'm just trying to think of like the ease of getting rolling.
Yeah, and have you guys used Git Pod?
Never heard of that. What is it?
So Git Pod IO basically allows you can put a button like the launch to Roku button on your README. And then if someone clicks that, it will actually fork that through GitHub and then spin that project up for them in a visual code in their browser with everything ready to go. And there's others like this, but I really like Git Pod because I mean it literally is just like Visual Studio. It's got you have a full terminal, you have everything you need to hook into it. It's made by the same guys that made Eclipse, so they know IDEs and stuff. I might play around with that because I think asking someone to clone something and run it on their machine and do all of that is even just a little bit too far, right? It's like click on this and, you know, you're kicking the tires. You're able to run this and it'll also save as a GitHub repository under your account. So if you close it down, you can come back and pull it up later.
That's so much better. That's that's way fewer steps than what I was suggesting.
So yeah, there it is. It's pretty cool.
That's fabulous. Yeah. Oh my gosh. I mean, because that goes back to the thing that I brought up early on about removing the barriers to entry and just letting people like play, like having a demo-y test area that they could play in. But this takes it even a step further than that, where it's like, here's your own demo-y test area, one click.
Yeah, and you could have like sort of a workshop where you start from scratch and build as you go to a completed demo where you already see everything working. And you can do that just by different branches on your Git and just include that in your README. But the other cool thing about this, and I'll shut up about it, is if you work on any projects and you want to do a pull request or a quick review, if you install that extension in your browser, then you'll get this Git Pod button and on every single repository that you're working on. And then you just click the Git Pod button for whatever branch you're looking at or whatever, and it'll just spin up that workspace with that code or that PR. You can make specific changes to that and submit it, and it never messes with your desktop. So that's kind of cool.
That's wild. Yeah, I've never heard of Git Pod before, but that's pretty, I'm surprised I haven't heard of it, but that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's so that's kind of the plan to try to build these, because what I want to do is build guides where people can kind of kick the tires on their own, but then also hold these workshops where we can, you know, have a full-on, you know, 8-person workshop and everybody can be on Git Pod. And then if there's any trouble, then you can go in and check it out and see what's going on. The one workflow I would like to go over is the multi-tenant workflow, and see if you guys can poke some holes in it. So basically what's happening is it's one kind of hyper service that's multi-tenant for the dev kind of dashboard. And the way that I'm coding it is that when the HyperClient actually goes to dev with a request, right? It goes to list movies or create a movie or whatever. It's gonna compose a token based on that secret. And inside that token, it's gonna put the key. So when it goes to Hyper, it's gonna have the key and it's gonna be signed by that secret. And then what Hyper is gonna do is use that key to look up the actual app in the dashboard service. And it's going to create a token that it knows the secret for the dashboard, so that the dashboard can verify that lookup. So that's secure. And then when it looks up the app that I, you know, kind of just created here, this app here, it's going to look that up. And then it's going to send that back to Dev Hyper, and it's going to take the secret from that and use that to verify the client token that the client sent. And if that's verified, then it's going to make one other check and say, well, if you're making a request, then that request has to be for your app name, which mine would be T Wilson 63. And if your request matches that, is part of that app name, then
Is that the issuer or the audience, Tom?
it would be, I think right now it would be the audience, but it could be either if the audience is not the right thing. But basically,
That's really what I was asking.
yeah. I have to look and see what the right one is to make sure that it's right. But yeah, it would be one of those nodes. And I think audience is kind of your refer. The issuer kind of creates the token. Yeah, I have to look at the language.
The audience, I think the audience is where the request is coming from. And
Right.
You have to validate that that audience is legit
Exactly.
based upon the request that's coming in.
Right.
So maybe would they be registering their audience, or is that captured at registration time?
So yeah, that's captured at registration time here. And you know, actually this string will be kind of close to the audience string. And then once it verifies the token, it's basically making sure that in a multi-tenant system that, you know, you're on the right tenant, right? Trip Ott can't make a request to T Wilson 63, or Robert Pierce can't make a request to Trip Ott, right? So it'll make sure that you're on the right tenant. And
the
then
audience and the tenant need to match, right? And that'll be all in the jot.
right.
Yeah, and compared against the registration details.
And then, but the wrinkle is that I'm looking up the secret at the dashboard based on the sub key, and then it's going to do a verification and then process the request and then return the response. So that'll basically allow me to have a multi-tenant system with no bleeding of the boundary of the hypercore, right? The hypercore remains the same. It's completely agnostic to whether it's a multi-tenant or it's a single tenant. Does that make sense? I know it's super confusing.
So
I'll just ask 5 more times and then I'll get it.
So it's not very clear to me what's happening on that Git at app/key. What exactly is being gotten there?
Yeah. So when you come in as a developer and you go to dashboard.hyper63.com and you sign up with your GitHub account, what's being created is a document in a secure Hyper, a document that's a type of app. And that document has a key, a secret, and an app name. And in this case, my key is this long string here. My secret is followed by this colon, and it's this long string here. And then my app name is this T Wilson 63. So when a request is coming in and the token is signed it's going to go through all this, and it's going to essentially, but because the user, the client, is not going to send this secret, right? It's going to use this secret to create or sign a jot. So it's not going to send this secret. It's going to send this key in the sub field, and it's going to send this app name or some sort of URL structure as the audience, let's say. So the thing is as this dev hyper, in order to verify that jot, I need a secret. So I'm making a GET request to dashboard, which is acting as the authorized body, if you will, the identity management service. So I'm going to take the key, which is part of the sub of the token, and I'm going to call the dashboard service, and it's going to give me the secret. Basically, it's going to give me the secret. It's going to give me the key, and it's going to give me the app. And when I get,
sorry.
Yeah.
That way you can verify the jot that they send you using the secret that you fetch.
that's correct.
Okay,
And
I understand.
yeah, and the cool thing about this is then every single tenant using the service is getting a different secret. So if if someone tries to use your secret to connect to Trip's service, it won't work, right?
I assume that that GET request to the identity provider is going to be locked down such that
That's
only
correct.
Dev Hyper can consume it.
Yeah, so it's locked down because Dev Hyper will generate its own jot that this dashboard knows about, right? And can verify it. So,
Okay. Like effective, like they'll have a set of credentials that it can use to, like, maybe like an ID token. If it was like OIDC, they'd have an ID token and then use that to request an access token and then use that, something along those lines.
yes, it's very similar to that. Yep.
Okay, this is clear to me now. Thanks for the clarification.
It's okay. Yeah, so I just wanted to run that through and make sure that you guys don't see any holes with it.
Yeah, my only, I guess, just my primary concern was just locking down that request to the identity provider, or the, I guess in this case, the authorization server, whatever we
Right.
want to call it. But if that's locked down, it seems like it would work to me. Is there a method for rotating keys? Like if a key was compromised?
That's what my question was, Tyler. Can you have multiple good keys out, and can you
I was thinking
regen?
the same thing.
Yeah, so right now, I've got the to-do list to kind of add a delete function here so that you can kind of delete the app and then you could create a new one. But there shouldn't be any problem with rotating keys. The question would be, I would probably create a button here so that they could kind of regenerate the key, so that it's the developer who owns this app can regenerate the key, because then they will basically break all of their instances that's using it, if that makes sense.
That makes sense to me. So if I'm understanding this correctly, does this all, it sounds like this also sets up, like for in the future, if you wanted to have multiple sets of keys, each with their own like set of scopes, like maybe one set of keys could only access like cache, or maybe you want to segment permissions across ports, or maybe like specific scopes per port. But I think this sort of sets up eventually moving to that, because you could just, it's just a JWT, and so you could just have scopes as claims on the token.
Exactly. Exactly. It sets it up for the scope so that you can have, you know, fine grain access, like maybe a read only user, or you can only access the port and not the queue. I mean, the search and not the queue, et cetera. So all of those things come into play. And you can also, you know, have multiple apps. Like right now, this is just for the free tier. You have T Wilson, you know, your name. But then in other tiers, this could act as kind of a proof of concept to float, well, how will, you know, developers build multiple apps on the service? And so hopefully this will be a, it will help me to create guides and workshops and allow everyone to have their own sandbox to play with. But I think it could be a lab, if you will, so that when we build the software as a service solution, we can learn from this model and see how to augment it to make it more robust and handle, you know, more security, you know, et cetera.
Yeah, that sounds perfect. Like the workshops almost kind of let you dog food it, so you can try and poke holes in it and refine it. I like
Exactly. Yeah. What do you think, Robert?
The last 4 minutes after you went to that, I got a work emergency messaging me.
Okay.
So when you transitioned from the diagram is when someone's like, "Hey, I need this answer now."
That's cool.
Sorry.
Well,
Yeah. Yeah. So I apologize for that, but yeah.
Trip, any additional thoughts from your side?
I think after, you know, the initial just have one active key at a time type scenario, after you dog food it, you may see the need, well, or not, to have multiple active keys up at the same
Yep.
time.
Yeah, no, and I think there's a lot of that, and this kind of
But the roll your own job thing is awesome, because it takes basically the need for an authorization server out of the loop for server to server auth.
Yep.
And one last dependency to go down on you.
yeah, I think it'll be super cool, and if it all works. And then the other thought is to add like an LRU cache on top of that. So if I've already, you know, kind of gotten the key in the last minute, there might not be a need to go in and get the key again. So that if you send, you know, 10 requests, it's not 10 additional hops here in a minute call type of thing. Auth0 kind of does that when they're pulling in their public keys.
You mean Okta?
Yeah, Okta.
Well, I mean, they just got bought or whatever.
They did.
So I'm
Yeah.
just trolling.
It's Okta and Auth0 are the same now. That's great. It'll be interesting to see how they merge. Cool. So that's everything that I had. So my goal is to try to get all of this up and running by the end of this week, and then work on, kind of doing the Figma design and pulling that into the web page, the new website, putting all that together. So that's really the focus of April is those two things, is to have a end-to-end kind of workshop guide platform with Hyper, and to have the new website. And the only other things that are kind of entering the picture is, do you think that we need a simple auth, like a simple auth port where people can do, .create account, .login, .logout kind of thing with email, password resets, etc. So that's one question to really try to sell the service, right? So to try to sell, or at least to get some eyeballs on it and say, you know what, in about 3 months, I would be willing to purchase this type of thing. The other thing is scheduled jobs, right? So the queue does a very simple push pull that works great for serverless environments, but I'm still struggling with the scheduled jobs, and I sort of feel like I'm overthinking that one, just because there are some use cases that I need to do that, but I don't think that that's a major use case for like startups, for example, off the bat.
That's a really good question, because I feel like the sort of scheduled job sort of use cases, at least for me, it's almost always sort of come up eventually on a product, but it's typically not at the start, but it always ends up showing up at some point.
One of the things you could do, Tom, is to have a generic, not too high fidelity roadmap draft that has things below a line that says, are you interested in, scheduled jobs? Or and then if you are, reach out to us, right? Because then you could use that as an opportunity to do discovery and to tap into their use cases. And the key is to not to do anything now that would paint you in the corner to.
Right.
Really good point. It's like having the people, because you've got your own vision for the thing, but if it's something that people want, like they'll let you know. And so this kind of queries or prompts for that. Nice trip.
Yeah.
And then
So
you could have people, you could list certain things with a high level description about what it is, and really generic use cases about what it support, and then you could have people upvote or downvote.
Yeah. No, there's a tool. I forget what the name of it is that we can hook in that really allows a collaborative roadmap where people can upvote and downvote features. And maybe that's what I do with auth and scheduled jobs, is just make those part of the planned roadmap and let people vote. Because the thing is if you've already got an auth solution, you probably don't want another auth solution. But if you don't have an auth solution, then you probably want it in the box. So I kind of see it kind of both ways. And like you said, Tyler, the scheduled jobs always come up. And the thing is how do you it takes a lot to think through that in the effort of, you know, infrastructure agnostic, right? Like support Amazon, Google, DigitalOcean, Render, etc. So it's not, you know, most people solve it by using their infrastructure tools and wrapping a wrapper on top of it. And maybe that's what we do.
Also,
Yeah, that
I'd leave a channel open for someone, so someone can contact and be like, yo, I've got a lot of money and I want to give it to you. As long as that channel is still open, anything
Yep.
else you do is going to be good.
Cool. Any thoughts, any other thoughts that I'm missing? Really trying to work that roadmap to get to some sort of announcement towards the end of April, early May, to announce whether it's private beta or public beta or whatever, just to, you know, try to get some developers to start to build hobby apps with it. And then really the roadmap to V1 is still more targeted in October, where we'll have like a full SaaS platform built out.
Yeah, are you thinking of engaging more like individual developers and getting them to drive stuff at their companies, or are you like from the bottom up, or because let's face it, we're at the bottom, or the other way around, like approaching you know, exec level people and having them like dictate?
A little of both, but I think for this period, right, for this phase of beta, if you will, for lack of a better term, is to really try to engage at the developer level and get feedback that someone has actually used the product and gives you feedback, right? Test drove the car, opposed to looked at some presentation or documentation and then feedback, because I think that's good early, but at some point you need people driving the car to really know how it's going to perform, right?
Sounds good.
Yeah, so I think, you know, there may be some, you know, upper level marketing just for impressions, but then actual, you know, really probably the announcement is, you know, check out Hyper. It's free for developers. Get your account, you know, build your next side project on it. And, you know, either get a t-shirt or, you know, maybe get some get something cool.
That's great. Sounds good.
All right, guys. Well, we're at 5 o'clock. If anyone doesn't have anything else, we'll call it a meeting.
Cool. Yeah, thanks for being flexible and rescheduling.
Yeah, no, thanks for the feedback, and I hope everyone has a great evening. And Svelte meetup, Svelte and View meetup is this Thursday. If you get time, be demoing the new SvelteKit. That's cool.
Nice.
I might need to put in
Am I doing in 9 days?
9 days. Yeah.
9 days. Okay. Sounds good. That's great. I'm in.
Agreed.
What do you did you have an idea for the presentation? Like were you aiming like intro? Like I can ramble all day. Sorry, this is off topic, guys.
Yeah.